Hey everyone, welcome to the most opinionated space podcast on the internet.
Ad Astra, the podcast where we talk about the intersection between space, policy, and technology.
I'm Jack, your resident space policy advocate.
And I'm Newton, I'm your guy for space technology.
So Newton, something was happening, I don't know, week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. What was that?
Oh, it was about a week and a half ago. Yeah. The Planetary Science Caucus launch event. It was pretty great.
That was cool.
Bill Nye came to town. We had a bunch of people on. I think that's pretty much all that happened about a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think of anything. Can you?
You know, I think there was a whole summit almost about humans exploring the surface of Mars.
Really? That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody who attended that summit?
Funny you should ask that, Newton, because on the show today, we have two awesome guests who both participated not just as volunteers, but as panelists at Humans to Mars Summit 2018. Hey, guys.
I think ourselves a pat on the back for a solid level of acting right there. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Hello.
So, Jack, you want to introduce our guests?
Yeah, so our first guest is Amadeus Blunt Garza. He is a high school student and was volunteer extraordinaire at Humans to Mars Summit this year. He goes to the Charles J. Colgan Senior High School, which just opened up in Manassas, Virginia, originally from Woodbridge, Virginia, and is a junior. He wants to pursue a path in mechanical engineering to one day major in robotics companies. He has a major passion for science, hence why he is volunteering for the Humans to Mars Summit and the upcoming Escape Velocity happening Memorial Day weekend.
I'll be volunteering for that too, actually.
Going to be a lot of fun that weekend. And our other guest is Keri Kukral, who is a science educator, CEO and founder of Raw Science TV, and a bio/electrical engineer. The Raw Science Foundation promotes STEAM education globally through access to energy and connectivity. She's been involved with a number of different projects, all helping transform her from her interest in the arts to sort of finding that intersection between the arts and science and engineering and entrepreneurship. And she wants to help others reach that same level of enlightenment, I guess I would say. And she currently serves on the advisory board of Partnerships for Change. So welcome, Keri and Amadeus.
Welcome to the show, guys. So I guess to get us started here, we should probably tell folks who are listening in, who are unfamiliar with this event, what H2M actually is, what the Humans to Mars event actually is. You want to take this one, Jack?
Yeah. So the Humans to Mars Summit is the premier activity, conference, whatever you want to call it, that happens in DC every year, the second week of May, that brings together people from not just the science fields, but science and engineering and arts, culture, philosophy, politics, all into the same room to talk about this overarching goal of sending humans to Mars, whether that's by 2033 or otherwise is up to discussion. And that's what happens at Humans to Mars. And so it's being put on by Explore Mars, an awesome organization that both Newton and I do a lot of work with. And every year, there's a number of events that Explore Mars puts on, from the Affording and Achieving Mars workshops to putting out the Humans to Mars report. But it all culminates in this one event over 3 days with a number of awesome extracurricular events, movie screenings, scotch tastings, everything. But it's all focused on that core question of how can we send humans to Mars, and what is the rationale behind that? Why do we want to do it? How are we going to do it? And I guess the penultimate question, when are we going to do it?
Right. And what makes it, and just to add on to that, what makes it different from most conferences or summits that you see is the sort of diverse backgrounds of everyone that's there. This is a literally get everyone in the room kind of summit. It's not just the techies. It's not just the brand advertisers. It's not just the science communicators. It's not just the politicians. It's everyone. Thomas Zurbuchen was there. Vince Cerf came to give his opinions on his opinions on the Mars mission. Folks who are just inspirational science communicators like astronaut Abby or Keri herself were there. This is bringing together everyone into the room so that they can get a sense of what's going on the other side of the Mars mission. There are people who are very focused and in their swim lanes, people who are specifically working on the technology, or people who are specifically working on the policy. This is them getting a chance to actually blend together and have a discussion.
Yeah, and sort of have that check-in between the people who are doing the policy, who are setting the budgets for NASA, and seeing that work pay off in the conversations they're having with people at NASA or people who are working in the private sector, and even with people who are working in the nonprofit sector doing science education, or who are being taught that science education, seeing everything from multiple points of view all over the course of 2.5 days. That also culminates in a briefing on Capitol Hill about the Humans to Mars report, which is also available online, and we will link directly in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So I guess without further ado, the first question is, what brought both of you, Amadeus and Keri, to Mars? Why Mars?
To be honest, though, like, not many people hear about this, like, at school and stuff. They don't know about this type of things. You know, I've told them about what I've done here at the volunteering summit. They're like, we're going to Mars, like, and, you know, it's kind of sad to hear, like, you know, nobody knows about this. So I want to be the type of person to inform them, make sure I know the information to give it to them, you know, kind of spread out the word. So, you know, volunteering at these summits, you know, learn a lot about it, meet a whole bunch of new different people and, you know, representatives for these type of things. It's a great thing to be at every year.
Great.
Yeah. And for me, I had an engineering career for almost 15 years in the biomedical field. And so, and like in the technical realm, there were things that were interesting and applicable, like remote digital health. You know, I worked on this product that was a continuous blood glucose monitor, one of the first ones where you could transmit the data, you know, over
cool.
over RF, like an implanted sensor. And so from a digital health and remote medicine aspect, I was like always super interested. And then of course, just from a, you know, layman's, who doesn't care about space and Mars just as a default, really? And then, and then about 4 years ago, I started a media company, and I just really care about space. And I think that going to Mars will just propel us on so many fronts on Earth.
I totally agree with that it's not just one reason. And I mean, we have two reasons here, 4 if you include me and Newton, as to why to go to Mars. And I think that was a major takeaway. I don't know if you guys want to give more detail on this, but I felt like that was the major thing that I learned at H2M was people are in this for a number of different reasons and come at it from a number of different perspectives. But what H2M did was sort of brought them all into the same room and said, it doesn't matter what your perspective is. The goal is the same. So how can we help each other out?
Yes. So do you want us to talk a little bit about like why we think Mars? Why Mars?
Yeah. I mean, like what was some of your key takeaways from the summit? Mm-hmm. Not just, you know, I attended. It was like, what did you learn? What was your big takeaway?
So one is something I learned from the summit, and one is just like an opinion I have. And the big takeaway for me, again, being from the medical community, is like how much going to Mars, like certainly it will unite us on so many fronts technically, and that we'll have to, you know, progress so much. But one key one for me is medicine. Like we won't be able to go to Mars unless we understand how radiation will affect our bodies and how we can, you know, repair our bodies due to the effects of radiation. That would include like cancer prevention, or, you know, somehow repairing DNA damage that would be done by radiation. And so to me, that was like a really huge takeaway that many speakers spoke about. And then just a personal opinion that I think was there but wasn't like a main focus is just energy utilization, and how, you know, advancements in nuclear applications of nuclear energy on Mars. You know, we have like fission processes for the rovers, you know, and obviously renewable solar energy. Like those things really have to be well defined in order to go. So I think those for me are the biggest two.
Yeah, Keri, you're hitting on something that I've actually been writing about recently. The interesting thing about the Mars mission is we seem to be on all of these technological fronts right now where there's a lot of nice to haves, and we're having programs where we're building up to these sort of, I certainly wouldn't say the singularity as it's often called, but we're building up to having these ideal technologies in the healthcare sector and smart infrastructure sector. A lot of it using AI and machine learning technologies to help get us there. But these are things that we could get to an ideal place with a lot of these things in 30, 40, 50 years. But what it seems that the Mars mission will do is push us to get something concrete within a set timeline. Would you say that's accurate? So particularly when it comes to the health space, it would be ideal if we had something that could actively analyze, like you were talking about before, the amount of glucose in your blood, and actually lend recommendations about that in a much more ideal fashion than we have right now. And we have research that's slowly stepping towards that. But a mission on a place like, say, Mars is going to have a limited amount of doctors with people with a limited amount of experience, and we're going to need tools when we're there that can actually do things like highly detailed diagnosis and things like that. We're going to have to actually come out with concrete tools for those, as opposed to just making smaller steps with research.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, I have a little puppy back there.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, people are always like, oh yeah, human body is not designed to go to Mars. We shouldn't go for like 100 years. We'll send robots first. And they think of boots on the ground as a symbolic gesture. But I mean, really, even just being able to get boots on the ground and come back or not come back would just, advance those things so dramatically just to do that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a push for the human race. It is. It's a forcing function.
And it causes us to make those discoveries, right? And I think that was also a major takeaway. And it's an often talked about topic in the space field, is you don't know what the spin-off technologies are going to be. Now, with something like Mars, there's things that we're working on here terrestrially that could be the research process could be sped up by having a concerted effort of going to Mars. But there's also a lot of technologies that along the way we're not going to expect to be developed. But we sort of know the branches of technology that they're going to explore to get there. So like medicine, like machine learning, like propulsion, all of those things, energy, that ultimately could have a benefit here on Earth. And I mean, one of the things we like to say in the advocacy side of the house is that, all the billions and billions of dollars that is spent in space is not spent in space. It's spent here on Earth, and there's jobs associated with that, and people's lives that are entirely dependent on the space sector, and expanding that only provides more opportunity to people here on Earth, not just the 4 people that get to go to Mars.
Is it only 4?
Well, it depends on what architecture you're using. It might be 6.
There's no way it will only be 4. I'm going to say that right. I am not on the planning committee. However, I can assure you it won't just be 4 people.
People would be real mad.
Yeah.
Well, they're all going to be Americans, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Who else is going to represent the human race on another planet?
Yeah.
So let's go around and sort of do a highlight moment from the conference. Obviously, I wasn't there, but for the three folks who were there, what would you say to you really stuck out as a highlight of the conference, or as they would say on the NPR Politics podcast, what was your can't let it go moment? What was the thing that stuck with you all week since the conference has been over? We can start with you. We can get you again, Keri.
Okay. Oh gosh, there were quite a few, but I have to say, I really enjoyed the screening of Seat 25 because, a lot of times, and it's totally understandable at space conferences or the things that the focus is so technical and like it's hard to envision just a regular average person, which I would consider myself, like actually going to Mars. And it was a really fun screening. This movie Seat 25, it's about this woman who wins a seat randomly, and she's not a space genius, and it's really well done. And the team that made it, Maddie Cook and Nick Agnew, they did everything themselves, like the whole thing, the music, the acting, the directing, the everything. And that was a highlight to me. I think it's like it brings more people, it includes more people in the story of going to Mars.
Right. I did get to so I didn't see the film. As I said, I didn't participate in any of the events this year except for the Scotch tasting. But I did actually get to meet the directors, Maddie and her husband, and yeah, it's really impressive that they shot all of that themselves. I don't think they had that big of a background in film prior to that, other than just normal college, like college work and things like that. So it was really impressive that they're able to put that together. I still have yet to see the film though.
Yeah, it's really well done. You could tell they have a nice long career ahead of themselves, and they love science films. This was their first film, but they plan and are continuing to make more science films. So I just think their way of including people in this story to Mars is really great.
Yeah, and that just goes to show just how many different fields can be involved in this huge mission on the way to Mars. Once again, people from the film industry. So yeah. What about you, Amadeus? What really stuck out to you?
Well, I had to. Do you guys remember the name of the second auditorium that they had the other part or the other part of the presentations?
It was so Lisner was the main one, but it was in the Betts auditorium for the second stuff.
Yeah, I had to run the slides for that one, but I'm really glad I did because I got to see the more technological side of how we're all doing this. So, like, not only did they show what we're at so far with those propulsion cannons, they also showed prototypes for the ships that will be taking hundreds of thousands of people to the ship to the planet at once.
It's a really, really big island,
in a sea of stars.
Yes,
it was very poetic, Jack.
That's what I do.
Yeah, and it was I blew my mind when they had actual video of the propulsion cannon of where it's at so far right now, and I had to tell you it's probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. People would be like, or a lot of people would just look at me crazy like it's just fire coming out of a hole, but it's way more than that. Once you learn the technology and stuff behind it, and what really intrigued me was that this other dude, I forgot his name. He came from MIT, Andrew Owens, I believe. He came from MIT, and he was talking about the probability and statistics of getting there and succeeding with the mission in the first place. He was talking about how we need to change certain things now so that we have a higher success rate when we do get to that point. Who knows how many years from now, but. Yeah, it was just I'm still thinking about it now. I was thinking about it yesterday. Looking up all the information about it. That's probably my biggest takeaway on that, and also how world representatives are coming around to speak of policies and stuff. To say we're sharing this next planet. Talk about that type of stuff. Like who will land first. What are we going to do? How are we going to distribute this planet evenly across the nations? But yeah, those are my biggest outtakes from the summit.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that actually. So distribution of of the planet. This is a topic that we've never had to come across before, but we're actually coming up on this in a couple of fronts. It's actually been talked about, as far as I know, less when it comes to Mars, but more so now when it comes to things like asteroids and asteroid mining, and actually dividing up different segments of asteroids, who gets to own property, that sort of thing. Jack, you understand a little bit more about the policy behind that. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So our entire framework of approaching that problem, or that policy situation of who owns what in space, where can you create borders, if you can create borders, all goes back to that Outer Space Treaty of 1967. not something that has really evolved beyond that, other than in interpretation of that outer space treaty. And as it stands, it's such a gray area as to what can be done on the body of a celestial object, whether it's an asteroid or the moon or Mars or wherever. It all falls into that celestial body category. And the whole understanding right now is that there's not really anything you can take from space and bring back here that isn't then the property of all of humankind. But what if you're up there and you build an orbital factory, right? Or what if you're up there and you want to designate a certain area as your landing zone for more supplies, and you just don't want another country to get in the way, or another entity get in the way of your incoming supply shipment. There's not precedent for that other than Antarctica. And people look at Antarctica and the treaties surrounding how that's broken up. And the international treaties have sort of broken down in that there isn't supposed to be sovereignty of any part of Antarctica. The idea behind the research stations there was that, well, you had the Americans, of course, had theirs, the Europeans had theirs, and even within the Europeans, the British have theirs, the Norwegians have theirs. And as time went on, there were these artificial distinctions made of, oh, well, this is the American territory, or this is the British territory. And I guess the policy philosophers talk about the moon and Mars and asteroids in that same way of, if we don't address that problem eventually, that we're going to have an ad hoc international regime and understanding of where those borders lie. So if there is no centralized process of determining where someone's land begins and where it ends on the moon or Mars, wars have not been fought over the land in Antarctica because there's not really much not many resources there other than what is used for scientific purposes. But if a deposit of platinum is found on the moon or on Mars or on an asteroid, and a company lays claim to it because they just got there first, is that the best way in which we can, I guess, differentiate between who owns what in space? So that is something that we have not discussed in space. I mean, we've discussed it in space policy, but in terms of the actual policies being implemented, there hasn't been much, except for, and this will kind of go into my highlight, which unfortunately it involves the junior senator from Texas. But I think the highlight I remember the most from the summit was Ted Cruz speaking on the second day, because it really showed that there is a level of support for space coming from the business community. And I think that intersects heavily with who owns what in space, because one of the lines Cruz said that I probably disagree with the most out of anything he did say about space was that the first trillionaire will be made in space. Why that matters and why that is labeled a good thing, or that should be something we strive towards, is up for debate. But the fact that the conversation is now, well, once private entities are there, they're going to start making money.
You said that was the thing you agreed with most or disagreed with most?
I, in terms of the trillionaire in space, I disagreed the most with that.
Oh, Jack.
Mainly because...
Come on, Jack. You're trickle-down economics.
Why have one person benefit the most out of everything when you can have a lot of people benefit the most out of everything? But that's just me.
Okay, so that was great. So I want to dig in a little bit into, while we have you here, Keri, onto some of your background. So I wanted to bring up a little bit about your organization, the Raw Science Organization. So where do you, so, and since this is focused on humans to Mars, how do you see your organization helping that mission along? What role are you guys, do you view yourself playing in that mission, and what role could you see yourself playing in that mission in the future?
I think, in the near term, I think it's very important to include artists and storytellers in anything that is technological creation. And just an example, like people think it's like this whole STEAM thing, hashtag STEAM, which drives me crazy. It's like,
me too.
I have to, yeah, it drives me crazy. Or like even hashtag like women in STEM, like no. And it's really like much deeper than that. Artists
Right.
and storytellers, they see the future a different way than the average person. And an example of that, that is a project I'm actually working on, is Mary Shelley, who envisioned Frankenstein 200 years. This year is 200-year anniversary, and she can envision every sort of positive and negative, that balance of techno optimism and pessimism, 200 years in advance. And we need people with that vision who sit at that intersection to help understand what some of our issues can be and how we might be able to overcome them. Because I think in when we're developing technology, we don't always consider those meta things. And so I was really pleased that Nokia Bell Labs joined the discussion this year, and they have this Experiments in Art and Technology program for many, many decades. That really, where they really explore that in depth. They've had, artists like Andy Warhol in the 60s and 70s that participate in these programs, and they sincerely work towards that. And so that's how I think one way that we can contribute. And I'm very interested in understanding, media and broadcasting in space, which will happen very, very soon. I mean, it's already sort of happening, and I'd like to be a part of and understand how that develops over time.
Absolutely. We're finally starting to get better imagery from space. I mean, recently we had the whole HD camera on the International Space Station. I say recently, that was like 2 years ago.
In the grand scheme of the universe.
Exactly. It's fairly recently. We're starting to build up these capabilities, and in reality, it's going to take. I mean, it's almost a completely different a subfield within broadcasting, or a different subfield within advertising and marketing and in the arts overall. Is how do you advertise when we actually have human settlement out in space? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's going to be like a penal colony at first out there, and it'd be fun. But we see like a thing that is often overlooked is the value of entertainment, not just for our humanity and for our spirits, but technologically. What is the biggest drive besides remote medicine or autonomous cars? What is one of the biggest drives for low latency broadband communication on Earth? It's multiplaying video games. If we had multiplayer VR video games and the ability to do that, like that's the largest industry out of any of those. And so I think the same is true. Although, like I said, the first people that go to Mars, like I don't want to go first. People are just digging ditches. Like that's not for me. But once people, that is not my game. But once people are actually able to have fun there, that should drive like a lot as well.
But even on the first mission, we have to come up with ways for them to have some sort of fun, because I mean, NASA's doing tons of studies right now, just in terms of people living in isolation. And, one of the things that's very clear is it can't be all work and no play, right? There needs to be some form of space entertainment, some form of the astronauts keeping themselves amused. And while they're able to do that on the International Space Station, it's not quite clear what they would be able to have on their way to Mars. Now, you did talk about VR, which is something that NASA is actively studying as one potential technology, which I think would be great. But is there there are other questions to consider? Is there some importance in having some form of entertainment on board, potentially a live entertainer, if you will, right? Do we pick it? And this goes into the astronaut candidacy issues. Do we pick an astronaut who knows how to sing, right? Someone who's going to make sure that people aren't bored on their way. These are things that actually matter and are hard to quantify in terms of candidacy, in terms of necessity to the mission. And there are things that really do need to be studied in depth over the next couple of decades as we're trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
So Amadeus, going on to you. You said you had a general interest in space studies. Where'd you say you go to high school again? I missed that earlier.
Charles J. Colgan Senior High School. It's in Manassas.
Great. Okay. And are you going to start going into the physics space?
Well, I'm more of heading towards more of the engineering side of it. So more of the capsules that we're living in space, like the robots, what can they do next, thinking of new ideas already now. I've got a few of my notes, what we want there. So
are you guys already doing projects that are somewhat related to space right now?
I did one, like I mentioned earlier, about the Space Game Federation, that could be the first possible game in space. That's our first form of sport in space that could be taken on Mars or in zero gravity. But what was also there, I also read about as well. The whole thing of the augmented reality and virtual reality. Not only can it be used for entertainment, as you guys are saying, but also a form of education, and even technology we have now, such as iPads, Apple Watch, and stuff, will be education to the students on this. On Mars, they can use their Apple Watch and stuff as notes and whatnot. They use tablets as their notebook, and that's all they need. They don't need anything else for school except a tablet for each student. It's even for those kids who want to learn, Mars education, quote unquote, from Earth. They can wear that augmented reality goggles to see these teachers real life for Mars being played back on Earth.
So one thing that's actually interesting is FAA right now is actually exploring the use of both virtual reality technologies and I believe some augmented reality technologies for pilot training. Actually,
yes,
So this is going back to some of those initial use cases. It's the initial stages of that. Amadeus, this is a really bold movie for you, The Matrix. That really old movie, The Matrix.
It's a classic.
God, where
I saw it on TLC the other day.
Oh God, where effectively they have a technology that can inject something into their brains. Now we're obviously not going to get there yet, but we will have some virtual reality capabilities where you could imagine people loading up certain pieces of certain training videos, pieces of software, and training people in a few days, or in terms of a Mars mission, maybe a month or two, and give them new skills on the fly. Halfway through the mission, they realize that one of the astronauts needs to learn a new skill that will be extremely helpful on Mars. This could be a technology that could get used for that.
Yeah.
Has a PhD ever been earned in space?
No. I mean, surrounding, yes, there are a lot of people who earn their PhDs studying space,
but not while in space.
Not that I know of.
Well, something that was interesting from the last augmented reality, virtual reality meeting that we had before H2M. This was back in December.
Oh, what event was that?
It was Achieving Mars, because they did a forwarding Mars.
Yes.
So it's AM5, I think was this last one. And what they talked a lot about was you could have a headset, an augmented reality headset, where instead of having to have a technical manual in front of you to understand how a certain system works physically, like what the physical system looks like, where the wires go, all that, you could have an augmented reality system that assists you in whatever task that you're trying to complete, whether it's rewiring something or connecting. I don't know. It depends on the system.
I saw some of the earlier stages of that technology, like 5 or 7 years ago, but back in my DoD days. It's a very useful technology.
Yeah, and so at that point, you don't necessarily have to have an onboard knowledge of a certain system. I mean, certainly you want a familiarity with it, but you don't need someone who they're an expert in that. I mean, on a Mars mission where they're going to be gone for 2 to however many years, depending on the architecture, that you have to pick a crew that sort of fits as many, checks as many boxes as possible, but it's very unlikely you're going to have a crew that checks every box.
Right. They have to be learners, right?
And they have to be learners, and you have to have something in place to supplement their knowledge as a crew. And so if it's something, a very obscure technology that they have that only 5 people on Earth understand, then you're going to have something to facilitate interacting with that. And augmented reality, I think, is where that is. And as the technology the processing power gets better of the headsets, and the headsets get smaller, you're going to be able to have, I would wager to say that all spacesuits are going to have an augmented reality system when we're going to Mars, if not well before then.
Oh, they definitely should. Absolutely. Yeah. That you're right. It's good to point that out as another technology that, I mean, is really going to take off where we're once again going to have concrete implementations. No more, we can do this, right? Right now we can look through glasses to see the schema of a few different items, of a few, a breadboard, or to actually look at the inside of a circuit board. But it's not exact. It's not concrete. It's not productized. It's not widely usable. And when we actually need to go to Mars, we're going to assemble something that has to be widely usable, and that has to be something that's probably not going to get upgraded, right? For 3 years. So it has to be mission ready. And then we'll have that technology both on Mars and here on Earth for a million different use cases. So once again, just showing the benefit of having these things that we can spin off into tons of different areas, and that people like Amadeus will be making billions of dollars off of one day.
Trillions.
Right? Yes, Amadeus.
I sure hope.
Okay, so how about this? Let's go around. If there was one thing you guys thought was missing from the Mars discussion this year, or something that you would like to see next year, what would it be? So why don't we get started? Who wants to start first, Amadeus or Keri?
I gotta think first.
Yeah, that's a tough question, Newton.
We only ask the hard hitting questions here on Ad Astra.
We are the most opinionated space podcast on the internet.
That's very true.
What was missing? I'd say volunteers first off.
Ouch. Nicely done. The kid's quick on his feet. I started a new job, all right?
That was quite the dig.
I think I would say astrobiology, like more astrobiology. Ooh. As far as there's always the fun stuff, are there microbes, things like that, but how could synthetic biology be used to terraform Mars? What are some of the other things going on in the solar system, like Europa, where we're now sending things to Europa to try to find life there? I think more astrobiology.
Yeah. Speaking of which, it was just mandated that we actually place science instruments on board the lander for experimentation on the on the Europa lander that we're building. It was that piece of news just came up today.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We were required to go there. We were required to put a lander on by law. We've been required to do that for the last year and a half, Jack.
It's been a little bit longer than that, but yeah, thanks John Culberson for that.
Yeah, but now they're actually planning to put a scientific experimentation instrumentation on board the lander. So that should be interesting. I don't know what they're going to put on there. I'm sure that's in design right now, but that was the announcement. was made this week.
I hope they put one of those synthetic biology printers, like 3D printers, where you just upload like a sequence and then
that would be very cool.
Build life. Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, did they talk about 3D printing? We're just going to totally go off on a tangent here. Did they talk about 3D printing at all in any of the panels this year?
They did for one. They were mentioning like they're probably gonna. Oh yeah, I also read about this too in the booklet they handed out. They said they're gonna put 3D printers on the planet in the first place to possibly build more machines or more buildings for them because the buildings would be made out of certain materials. So yeah, so they have printers there on the planets to make it for them instead of shipping it every couple months.
You have to. Yeah. What's likely to happen, and they're actually, ESA has been studying this for the moon for the last 4 or 5 years. But what's likely to happen is that we send 2 ships. And I'm sure you guys have heard this at the conference multiple times. But one ship made for the humans, the other ship made with materials for construction. And that construction would be done by 3D printers. But we would use both the resources that's on Mars and combine that with the materials that we would bring in order to create structures for whatever human settlement that we're actually going to be setting up, or the tools that we need in general. That's kind of a must-have for the overall mission, which is why I was wondering to what extent 3D printing was brought up in the first place. And that Keri is where the archaeologists come in and structural designers need to come in as well. Going back to the art piece.
I feel like a major key thing they're missing is kind of reaching out to the younger generation, letting them know that this is more than just another big step through for mankind. I feel like because it's a whole other planet to start new things for every little thing you could think of. These kids are like, yeah, I'm not into science stuff like that. I'm into, I don't know, makeup, beauty. Like we'll be the first people to make a certain product for Mars or can last that Mars condition or inside the spacesuit, stuff like that, or like just reaching out to younger minds or for kids who aren't as interested in science to try and make a difference or try and actually be involved in this, because this isn't this shouldn't. I feel like this whole mission shouldn't be just for the people of science. It should be for all of mankind, because this is requires everyone's input, everyone's help.
Absolutely.
to start proper colonization on this new planet. So I feel like reaching out to those people, reaching out, I take that back, not just younger generation, to everybody possible, instead of just the major scientists, anything that ends with the ist. I feel like that's what they should be aiming for, not just a certain group of people.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree. One thing that that makes me think of in terms of this mission, and in terms of realistic missions, the way NASA has operated, the way government has operated in the past, is continuity. Do we go there, execute the mission, come back, and just leave everything that we used there, or do we go there, execute the mission, establish something for people to build on later, and have those people effectively be on the way as this group is leaving? I don't think anyone here has the answer to that, and I don't think NASA is currently planning that. But it would seem that would be more of an appropriate use of the resources that we're going to build there, because there's going to need to be upkeep if we're going to continue doing missions on Mars. As far as I know, we're just planning for the 1 year execution and then leaving the rock. But if we're planning on doing more, we should do it in a way that is cost effective, which would not include building a new settlement every time.
Well, I think there is value in creating those prefabricated structures or the means to create them on the surface. I think there is a value in that, but also I think that long-term planning is very important and has been missing because there isn't just one architecture, right? There's still multiple. Every company has their own Mars architecture.
Well, and this is the thing. I haven't heard, and that's why I brought it up. I haven't heard this conversation really be conducted. I've heard the conversation about, 6 months there, 1 year on the planet, and then 6 months off. but I haven't really heard much about afterwards. And yes, we're 15 years away,
but also we're 15 years away.
But also we're 15 years away. Exactly. Should we be planning on, on completely rebuilding whatever settlement we set up after our first go around? Should we be doing this in a way that is completely additive, which makes getting that first mission completed more difficult? It's easier, just conceptually, it's easier to do a one-off and then go and do another one-off. Just in terms of overall, it's harder to solve the problem of how do you make this tractable, how do you make it scalable, so on and so forth. And so that would be making a difficult problem even more difficult.
And I think you would eventually run into the problem. Well, here's how I'm thinking about it, is that humans so far have been really good at one-off projects. Even if it was a 5-off project like the Apollo missions, or we're really good at creating something that's supposed to last 10 years and making it last 25. So looking at the ISS or looking at Antarctic bases, that there is this know-how, if we put our mind to it, if we put our resources in the right places and we're thinking about it in that way, that maybe we can say we look at Mars and see it as an Antarctic base, that it's not a mission of exploitation or a mission of one-off discovery, but it's laying that foundation. And you're right, that conversation isn't happening. And I think mainly because there isn't a concerted architecture. There's no, okay, well, if we want to get there by 2033, these are the milestones over the next 5 years, and then milestones after that to get to Mars by 2033. It's sort of SpaceX has theirs, and Lockheed Martin has theirs, and Boeing has theirs, and the US government has like 15 of them, and there's not one legally mandated architecture. And there has been movement on that front, especially in the last authorization of NASA. There was a call in there for a continuous report that's put out after the first 18 months, and then 6 months after that details what that mission to Mars, what the roadmap to Mars is, and how it's changing over time. But we have yet to see...
Right, we talked about that on a recent episode.
But we have yet to see the first version of that report. And I think even then, after that first version, there isn't just one plan. And I think looking back at previous space endeavors, the ones that succeeded were the ones where there was a very clear goal in mind, and there was an architecture for it that was decided on very early on. So if you look at Apollo and you look at the space shuttle, but if you look at something like Space Station Freedom, which eventually became the International Space Station, there was not an idea, a singular idea behind it, but there was a million ideas, that every stakeholder had a different idea of what the station would do, and it floundered for the first 15 years of its existence until the Clinton administration came in 97 and brought in the Russians, only to make the station not an orbital factory or observatory, but to make it an international partnership exercise, which has some scientific benefits. But overall, the programs that don't have that concerted effort turn into mush after a couple of years, and it's harder and harder to execute the mission when there isn't a clear set of guidelines or principles or milestones along the way that you have to be hitting. And so I think that roadmap to Mars is really important. And you're right, Newton, that like if that is something that is missing from the conversation, is what even is the mission? And that, I think, to answer your question,
I should have been on a panel this year.
That's also what I think is missing. Is there's this idea that we're getting there by 2033, and that has remained consistent. And if you remember the conversation from last year, we said, well, it seems more tangible. I feel like this year there was a step backwards in that it felt a little less tangible, but it definitely felt like there were more people in the room, not just because attendance was higher, but because there was the AR, VR people and the Silicon Valley people, and there was a lot more stakeholders in the room, but still the goal is mush.
Yeah.
I mean Mars.
All right, Jack, I'm going to leave the final question to you.
Final question. Okay, this will be a very easy one. Are you going to H2M next year?
Putting people on the spot.
And if so, what is your, I guess this kind of ties into the last question. What is your biggest wish? What is the thing you want to see next year, 2 months before the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 landing on the lunar surface? What is the major breakthrough, the major policy topic? What do you want to see next year? What do you want to be decided?
I'm going to augment that question. What do you want to see next year? And what will you be bringing to the table next year?
Good. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Oof.
It's a three-parter. Start with, are you even going next year?
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm most definitely going next year. I love to support, especially like Explore Mars. I love to support them all the way. I first found out about it due to my dad being part of the Planetary Society and hearing about this summit. Ever since I heard about it, I was like, why not volunteer? Help out in the name of science. But but the main reason that I now look forward to coming to these summits is to find out more information and to find out how far we are advancing this technology and see what's really truly happening, kind of underground where nobody's really paying attention to. So yeah, that answers that question. I'm definitely coming next year. What do I want to see next year? Because I have to answer the question first. What do I expect to see in the first place next year? You know what I mean? Because I didn't expect to see such advancement in the plans of getting there in the first place. I didn't expect to see such advancements in the technology. I didn't expect to see HP Intel coming in, having that whole VR session, talking about plans of having a community group project to work together to make these different technologies for Mars. Like, I didn't expect to see all that this year. So what do I want to expect next year, I think, is the main question I want to answer. And to that, I got to say, I honestly don't know. I don't know. Sorry.
Hey, that's the process of discovery. You don't know what you're going to learn next year.
That's also true. So and you pointed out a couple of things that you said that you did see this year, like the VR technology, which things like advancement in those technologies might be something to think about. I know that there's stuff that you're exploring in that space in school. So if let's say the coordinators of Humans to Mars were listening to this, just for instance, Debbie, excuse me. If you could give them one suggestion potentially about the VR space that you would like to see next year, what would it be?
I hope the programming is better next time, because and I say that like not to be rude or mean or anything, because like I've seen some VR games, some of them are like amazing, but I feel like we can get farther with it. Just the new advancements in gaming controllers and stuff we have now, because all we can do at most right now with VR is move around with joysticks and grab blocky type objects from the air. That's the best we can do right now. So hopefully to see a bit more advancement in the technology, because
so an improvement in user experience, right? Because usability of the technology, which is going to be important on a ship in space, or even training for it here on the ground. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and you had the one final hard question, which is, what are you going to bring to the table next year?
Hopefully more help.
And a resume.
And a resume.
There you go. Solid. Great answer. Thank you very much, Amadeus.
No problem.
Keri, what about you?
Yeah. So what I would really like to see next year are two things. I would like to see a panel on the partners that are working together, putting the 4G network on the moon, and probably doing other exciting things. This includes Vodafone, Audi, and Nokia Bell Labs. I would like to have people explain what's happening, what's there, and bring people in on this monumental thing that's going to happen next year.
Actually, that's true. We haven't even brought that up during this entire discussion.
Well, we only have an hour.
It'll be the 4G network will be operational in 2019.
That's amazing. Yeah. That is like it's mind blowing, and no one's talking about it, including us apparently. And so, that's true. Yeah. And I just started talking to Vodafone for reasons. But go on. Sorry.
So that would be really perfect. And then number 2, I would like to see like a gathering, maybe a VIP night, or not a VIP night, just a night in a panel that is everybody alive that is really from that Apollo era for the like a reunion, and having a discussion about the past and the present on the moon and what that means for Mars. Think that would be culturally amazing, significant and amazing, and people could be captured their thoughts.
That's a beautiful idea. That's amazing. I really like that one.
Well, Buzz did show up this year.
He did. Right.
Rather unannounced.
Yeah.
In the middle of Ted Cruz getting there. It was great.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
have Buzz get Nancy Conrad, who is Pete Conrad's she is the wife of Pete Conrad, who was the third man to walk on the moon. Get engineers, people who developed satellites, like any people that were really part of it.
And we know a lot of those people in this area. I mean, we could go and talk to folks in the National Space Society. That's where a good chunk of them are. Or even people who are currently a part of the Planetary Society. Or just go talk to some folks at Goddard who are still there from that era. They're around. We between me and Jack, we've probably talked to at least a handful of them.
What were they working on? What was it like then in terms of technology and where we are right now?
That's a brilliant idea. I call shotgun. I call shotgun on hosting that panel. Debbie, if you're listening, Artemis, if you're listening, and Jack, what about you? Well, no, hang on. Keri didn't get to the third question.
A wild dog has appeared.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
No, sure.
Hold on.
No problem.
I got the dog.
Now I'm going to ask the dog the question too.
I think that what I would bring, besides helping to get people or groups mentioned in the last 2 answers, I would like to bring an actionable idea together that is a way for people to participate in this 50th lunar anniversary. And this monumental thing that's happening with the moon.
Yeah.
How can they be involved?
Okay.
That's what I'd like to bring.
Very cool. Well, we'll look forward to seeing some of that next year. We could probably hopefully we'll get that coordinated. All right, Jack, what about you? Actually, you were at the conference. What was missing? What would you like to see?
I would like to, and I'm of course going next year. Let's answer the first question.
Okay.
The thing that I want to see next year,
besides me. Go on.
Well, I'm gonna see you like next week or something. But the thing that I would really like to see is a focus on what is the next step we have to take. So we've got all these stakeholders in the room, and we're talking about the work up until this point and the work that is ongoing and what's immediately happening in the future. I don't think we're really talking about 2023 or talking about 2020 even. I think I would like to see more of a focus on like what is our next step to getting to this ultimate goal. Like it'll almost be, with the 50th anniversary, saying what is going to be our moment that ignites the rocket booster that gets us to Mars.
And that should be easy to answer next year, because we should have these organizations, like you talked about earlier, giving us roadmaps.
Yes, absolutely.
They're legally obligated to now.
And they will be updated regularly.
We should be able to have a much more concrete picture than we've ever had before.
Yeah. And not just that, but that there's also I want to see the political will starting next year. We're going to have a completely new Congress, whether it's a Democratic majority or whether Republicans maintain their majority is still yet to be seen. But it is going to be a new Congress with a lot of new ideas and a lot of energy looking towards the future as we finish out those last 2 years, potentially, hopefully, last 2 years of the Trump administration going into the 2020s. So what I want to bring to the conference is that sense of urgency about this mission, and not just in we should be focusing on it, because at a conference full of space geeks talking about space, there is already that sense of urgency, but I think that there is a portion of it, the advocacy portion of it is missing a little bit. And like, what is it as private citizens we can do to advance space science and exploration of not just the moon, Mars, of everything, of what can we do to expand ourselves into the future as a spacefaring, space exploring, space understanding, cosmically minded species that has never existed before.
Very cool.
That's what I want to bring. And that is my pitch for a panel. Advocacy, how do we do it?
I actually have a couple ideas for panel pitches next year, which I will talk about more offline.
All right. Well,
but yeah, guys, it's been an hour.
Yep, it has been an hour. And thank you both for coming onto the show. It was a great conversation. I'm sure there are going to be many more like this, both online and offline. You both are incredible people, and it was great to meet both of you. Well, Amadeus, I've known you for a while, but Keri, it was great meeting you, and I'm sure I'll see you at the next Explore Mars or Planetary Society or whatever event, whether it's here in DC or anywhere else around the globe.
Yeah, Keri, real quick, tell folks how they can reach out to you or hear from you. Twitter handle, anything like that.
Yeah, I there's a Raw Science TV Twitter handle. I have one personally, Keri Kukral. You can go through the Raw Science site. And I don't know if you need emails and stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, just like Twitter, however you want people to hear from you, hear, things that you're saying. Where can they find you on Twitter or like you said, Raw Science TV. That's good enough.
Yeah, Raw Science TV is good. We have a Raw Science Facebook group. I blog a lot personally on Facebook, so there's several places like that. Yeah,
and we'll link all that stuff down in the show notes.
Yeah, and Amadeus, what about you?
I don't want to sound like an arrogant kid and shout out to my social media profiles because I have nothing interesting in my life for right now. So.
Okay, no, that's cool. Look, I totally don't blame you. It was just in case you wanted to. All right. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, Jack, once again, thank you both. You guys have been great guests. This was a great show. And I hope to see both of you before Humans to Mars next year. Actually, Keri, we should chat about some other things offline. But in the meantime, Jack, you got anything else?
That is all that I have, except that the next episode is going to be a very special one. We have a candidate running for Congress here in Maryland. I say here in Maryland like we're in Maryland. We're both sitting in DC, but in Maryland, just over the border from where we are, we have a candidate who's running for Congress on a pro-space platform, and we're going to have him on next week.
Great. Should be fun.
Yeah.
All right.
So as always, I'm your host, Jack.
And I'm Newton.
Adam.